Now let's set up our Firebase project. Head over to console.firebase.google.com, and here you can click Add Project. We're going to name our project Flutter-Instagram. Hit Continue. Enable Google Analytics. Select your default account for Firebase, and then hit Create Project. The first thing we're going to do is add our iOS app. So we can select iOS here, and then we need to add our bundle identifier. The way we find our bundle identifier is by right-clicking the iOS folder, and then clicking Open in Xcode. Here you can see we have our bundle identifier, com.example.flutter-instagram, and you can change this to your own bundle identifier. So let's copy this and go back to Firebase. Here I'm going to paste in the bundle identifier. Click Register App. Next we'll download the Google Service-info plist and drag that into our Xcode project. Let's go back to Xcode, open up Runner, Runner folder, and then we'll drag our Google Service-info plist right underneath the info plist here. And remember to check copy items if needed. Make sure your Google Service-info plist has the same name as mine. If you download multiple copies, you might see a 1 or 2 appended at the end, so make sure you just remove that and have .plist. And now we're done with Xcode, so we can close this and expand this again. Next, we don't need to worry about adding the Firebase SDK. We can skip the initialization code because we're using Flutter, and then hit Continue to Console. So that's our iOS app. Next we'll set up the Android app. Select Add App, then click Android. Here we need to register the Android package name. And to find that, we can go into VS Code here, the Android folder, App, and then build.gradle. Inside default config, we see application ID, and we'll make this the same as the iOS one, so com.example.flutter-instagram with a capital I. Let's copy this, and then go back to Firebase, paste in the Android package name, and then select Register App. Now we'll download the Google Services.json. And here it's telling us to drag the Google Services.json into the app folder. And we can just drag it right into here. And just like before, make sure your Google Services.json has the exact naming of Google-Services.json. Back in our build.gradle, let's increase the min SDK version to 21. And then we want to add something called multi-dex enabled and set that to true. And this is necessary to run Firebase on the Android app. Let's continue with the setup. Click Next. And here it's telling us to add the class path com.google.gms for Google Services inside of the build script dependencies for the build.gradle inside the project layer. So that's actually this build.gradle here. And underneath JetBrains, we can paste that class path in. Let's also double check that we have Google inside of the repositories. So here we see repositories Google and repositories Google. So that's all good. Let's scroll down a bit more. And here we can see we need to copy the Google Services line and add that into the app build.gradle. So let's go into app build.gradle, and right underneath Kotlin Android, let's paste in the plugin. At the bottom of this file, we need to go into dependencies, and here we're going to import the Firebase BOM. So let's copy this, scroll down to the bottom, and here we'll paste this in. Now if we look at this a bit closer, it says we need to add the dependencies for any other desired Firebase products, and we can find those here. Let's open up this link. And here we have things like analytics, authentication, Cloud Firestore, cloud messaging, cloud storage, and a ton of other Firebase products. For our project, we're going to be using 4 of these products. The first is analytics, next is authentication, Cloud Firestore, and lastly, cloud storage. So here we're going to copy com.google.firebase Firebase Analytics. And here we can write implementation and paste that in. Next, we'll do the same for authentication. Copy that, implementation, paste it, implementation, Cloud Firestore, and lastly, cloud storage. And you may have noticed that we didn't have to use any version numbers, and that's because we're using Firebase BOM. So we don't have to specify any version numbers. Let's hit next, and then continue to console. Now let's go through the sidebar here and do some additional setup. We're going to be using authentication, and we want to enable email authentication. So click Get Started, and here we can select Edit Configuration, and then Enable, and hit Save. And now when we implement email and password signup, we already have it enabled in our Firebase project. If you're interested in using other sign-in providers, you can go through this list and enable them. Now let's set up Cloud Firestore. Click Create Database, and then we'll start in test mode. And this Firebase rule here just means that anybody with your database can view, edit, or delete data from your database for the next 30 days. Let's click Next. And since I'm in the US, I'm going to choose US Central. And now we have our Firestore database. If we go into the Rules tab, we can see the rule that lets anybody read and write to our database for the next 30 days. And we can make this a bit more secure by instead checking if the request.auth.uid is not equal to null. And this just means whenever a user tries to read or write to our database, we check if the request has a valid user ID. If the user ID is not valid, then the user cannot read or write to the database. Let's click Publish. And now we'll go to Storage. Storage is where we're going to store all of our users' posts and profile images. And to make sure Firebase actually works on our Android emulator and iOS simulator, we need to initialize Firebase. To do that, let's make main asynchronous, and then we can write await firebase.initialize app and import Firebase core. Because we're trying to access the device, we need to add the line widgets flutter binding .ensure initialized. If you don't include this line, you're going to receive an error about initializing Firebase, and it's going to tell you to add in this line. Let's run the Android app, and we see that it launches successfully. Now let's test the iOS app. And the iOS app works too. And now we're all done with our Firebase setup. In the next video, let's start building out our app.